So welcome back to our discussion today of Speech Construction 101. As we've been working on the last few weeks in our class, we are trying to come up with the topic, and now we're going to actually put our speech together. I want you to think of a speech construction like a sandwich. We have the top layer of the sandwich, the bread, then the meat in the middle, and then the bottom part of the sandwich. If you'll notice, the thickest part of a sandwich is obviously what's in the middle. When we construct our presentations, we need to think of that analogy to make sure that we have a nice thick bun on the top, our introduction, that we have a lot of meat and veggies in the middle, and that we have a smaller bun on the bottom. In class last week, we worked on our topic selection. And I had you get in groups with your index cards and to talk to your audience, your classmates, about what they wanted to hear from the speech. You talked about your topic, and then you asked yourself and your audience the questions. If you could only tell me 3 things about this topic, what would they be? And your class members gave you suggestions. You came up with the list yourself, then your class members also helped you with those suggestions. Well, now it's time for us to take everyone's suggestions and to decide on our main points. Today's topic in this short video is going to be the body of your presentation. For a 3 to 5 minute speech, you should have a minimum of 2 main points and a maximum of 4 main points. What I'd like to do is to talk about the construction of those main points. We're going to do this in terms of point A, supporting material, a supporting material, transition sentence. Point B, supporting material, the next transition sentence. And then your third main point, 2 more pieces of supporting material, and then the in conclusion. The next video after this presentation will be on introductions and conclusions. But first, we have to have something to introduce and to conclude before we can write those. So let's work on the body of our presentation. Like a jigsaw puzzle, we want to assemble the main contents of our presentation. We need to define, though, what supporting material is. If I was doing a speech on hospice, and let's say my 3 main points were, first I want to tell you the criteria to get in a hospice program, then I want to tell you what type of benefits you're going to receive, and then I want to tell you how to pay for it. Well, I can't just say criteria, benefits, payment. I have to develop what I'm talking about, and we do this with the use of supporting material. You can see on the screen to my left that supporting materials are informative pieces of information that serve as the basis for that statement. They build the body of the speech, or we can call them the meat of the speech. We have to have materials which support what we're trying to talk about. Supporting materials, they clarify, they prove, and they add interest. Much like the children that are the bottom layer here and are supporting the other child on the top of their backs, that's what supporting materials do. The child on top is the statement. The children that are on the bottom layer, they are supporting what was just said. So what are some different types of supporting materials? You can use things that are explanations. If I am going to talk about the criteria of a hospice program, there are 4 criteria of a hospice program. I'm going to explain each one. The first criteria is that you have to have a terminal diagnosis with a prognosis of 6 months to live. I'm going to talk about a primary caregiver and explain what the role of a caregiver is. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about you cannot be seeking a cure for your illness. And I would explain the different types of cures for that illness and how you're no longer seeking that cure. I could also, in terms of a supporting material, I could offer a description. When I used to give this talk on hospice, I had a lot of my audience members that were a little unsettled about one of the criteria being you cannot seek a cure. And so I would spend some time describing to my audience about the hospice patient. By the time a hospice patient has been admitted into the program, they're ready for the fight and the battle to be over. They've been fighting this illness for years, and they're just ready to die with dignity. So I would describe the average hospice patient. Expert opinion and testimony. When you do a presentation, don't think that it's just you and your information. Often we believe public speakers if they bring in experts, people with their own opinions or expert testimony. Think about a jury trial when they have the forensic scientist up there or the police officer, and we've seen enough CSIs to know that expert testimony can make a case. If you're researching your presentation and let's say it's on global warming, well, you don't have all the information about global warming. You're interested in global warming, but there are many experts out there who you could quote them in the body of your presentation that would support whatever you're saying about global warming. Statistics. I love the use of statistics. Statistics help provide a picture of what something looks like. 1 out of 10, or 5 out of 20, or 65% of all communication is in the nonverbal form. Statistics help us to quantify what we're talking about. Now, they need to be truthful. Shocking statistics for shock value's sake really don't help anyone. If I was to come in here and say, did you know that 1 out of 3 people who get a tattoo contract hepatitis B? Now, I'm sure you're looking at your tattoos going, oh my gosh, do I have hepatitis B? That's not truthful, but I got your attention, but it's the wrong type of supporting material because it's inaccurate. So make sure that your statistics are truthful, and you might want to check them out. My mom used to say that figures can always lie and liars can always figure. Make sure statistics are true. It's the one thing that can trip you up. Also, if you're giving expert testimony or you're using statistics, tell me where you got the information from. According to the doctors, one out of this, which doctors? Let me know that your source is a valid source. And as we've discussed in class before, Wikipedia is not always the best source of information. Make sure you check your facts and your figures. Definitions. Usually we reserve definitions for technical information. We all know what a desk is. We all know the definition of a video or a DVR. We all know the definitions of certain types of programs, but you might not know the definition of hospice. Never assume that audience members know. The definition of hospice, it is a program for people with a terminal illness who wish to die in their own home and receive care while they're going through the hospice program. Definitions can be highly useful, and again, never assume that audience members know what the definition of something is. Stories. We love stories. Stories are great supporting materials. If you're doing your first informative speech on your favorite vacation and you're talking about when you went skiing and how much you enjoyed that experience, maybe there's a story that can go along with it. Did you know that I've only skied once in my life? And I learned how to ski in Vail, Colorado. And the day went really well. I'm not the most coordinated person, but I was coming down the slopes. It was the last run of the day, and I managed to stop right at the back person who was waiting in the lift line to go up, and they all fell like dominoes. It was down, and my instructor came up to me and said, maybe skiing is not your forte. I bet there's another sport that you would be really good at. That story added interest to me talking about my ski trip. We love stories. We love quotes. Quoting famous people, hypothetical quotes. Make sure again that if you're going to quote someone, that you use their name and tell us how they're credible to be quoted. Visual aids. Besides yourself being a visual aids help tell your story. They're a type of supporting material. And lastly, statistics that I've talked about before. Think about statistics in terms of visual aids though. Okay, you can verbalize the statistic, but if you have a pie chart or a graph it's much easier for us to understand what you're talking about. Remember, statistics can sometimes be boring to our audience, but if we have a vivid picture that goes along with them, we're going to understand them a little more clearly. Last, I want to talk a little bit about transition sentences. We've talked about your supporting material, but how do you move from point A to point B? We use what's called a transition sentence. It is a bridge of thought. So I've been talking about, for instance, my example of hospice, and I told you about the 4 criteria that it takes to get in a hospice program. A diagnosis of a terminal illness, 6 months or less to live, primary caregiver, and you can't be seeking a cure. So I've talked to you about the criteria. Well, now I want to start talking to you about the services that you're going to receive as a hospice patient. How do I get from point A to point B? I'm going to use a transition sentence. Now, we've been just discussing the delivery of your presentation, and I want it to be extemporaneous, prepared and practiced, but not written out word for word. When you outline, you're going to outline your main points, your supporting material, but transition sentences are a little different. I like to see in your outline that you write your transition sentence out word for word. This helps in 2 ways. The first way is it gets you on the bridge to connect the points. The second thing, though, and this is where it helps me a lot, is if you're excited about your topic and your audience is with you and you want to talk more and more, and maybe you get off the topic. Maybe you kind of wander or you drift a little bit. A transition sentence will come to the rescue because it's going to help you pull you back to your speech and help you move on to your next main point. So I digressed. But I can look at my transition sentence and say, now that I've discussed with you the criteria of a hospice program, I'd like to share with you some of the benefits you would receive as a patient in the hospice program. See how I segued from my first main point and I went right into my second main point. The body of a speech is really not that difficult to put together. Think of only 3 things that you want to talk about in that topic, and then come up with explanations, stories, quotes, definitions, visual aids. Think of 2 different types of supporting materials that you can add for a fantastic presentation. Thank you.